As-Built aims to transform technology-driven smart cities to human-centric smart society with comprehensive and interlinked solutions to improve people's quality of life. Smart Society utilizes As-Built's digital twin IBMS platform to create smart building automation that supports citizens and clients, not just with data integration, but also delivering committed values through the execution of smart projects. Big data collected from IoT devices in each subsystem will be diagnosed and analyzed within As-Built's IBMS platform to create smarter facility management with general preventive maintenance, prescriptive maintenance, and even predictive maintenance. The platform uses data to create an identical twin of the physical space into a digital space to simulate and predict possible events in the future, thus providing actionable insights, deterioration diagnosis, operational fault detection, and automated optimal control. Smart building automation improves aspects of facility management by incorporating building information modeling into the IBMS platform. Building users can enjoy improved experiences via smart tenant services from personal devices to requests for building services. Smart Experience for VIPs is one of the dedicated applications that can deliver an extraordinary experience for your VIPs as they enter the building through IBMS interfacing security CCTV, car parking, room booking, and smart air conditioning system. Through human-centered automation innovations, As-Built strives to create a leading-edge smart society.
Solving complex challenges is in our DNA. Go back to our roots and you'll see why. Surbana Jurong Group was formed in 2015 through a merger of the consulting arms of Housing Development Board and Jurong Town Corporation, who played critical roles in Singapore's development. Today, Surbana Jurong is a global multidisciplinary consultancy group in 120 offices across 40 countries. We are architects, engineers, designers, planners and specialists driven by progressive thinking. By designing and delivering quality housing, workspaces, roads, rail, hydropower and critical infrastructure, we are redefining cities. Building cities, shaping lives, expresses how every project is an opportunity to fulfill aspirations and enrich lives. Our logo's bold red dot radiates creativity and innovation, emblematic of Singapore, where the group is headquartered. Surbana Jurong has grown from strength to strength through transformative acquisitions. The group offers comprehensive consultancy solutions, anchored on sustainability and enabled by technology, to partner communities around the world in building a smart, sustainable and resilient future.
Ultimately, cities are made up of people. 6 billion people will live in cities, 70% of the population by the year 2050. Meeting their needs means we must transform the way our cities operate and build a bridge to the future. Technology can help make our cities better places to live, where citizens, businesses, and government work together to make cities healthier, safer, more sustainable, and to improve education by making cities more digital. What's next for your city?
Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Group is a global leader in manufacturing and engineering technologies. Spanning numerous industries. Delivering real solutions to the world's most pressing issues. So together, we move the world forward.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the World City Summit 2021. I'm your MC Deborah, and thank you for joining us at the Cities Adapting to a Disrupted World. In a few moments, I will introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Dilhan Pillay. We would then welcome other speakers to speak, and this will be followed by a moderated discussion. Please note that simultaneous interpretation in Mandarin is available in a separate channel. As audience members, you can take part in our ongoing poll. We will reveal the poll results later in the session. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very honored to have Mr. Dilhan Pillay, the Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of Temasek International. Mr. Dilhan is here with us to give the keynote address for this session. Mr. Dilhan, please.
Indeed a privilege for me to be here to join you at the World City Summit conference. Climate change is an existential challenge for the world that is affecting many countries and cities. If not addressed, it can lead to dire consequences that would threaten the well-being of communities. Technology has improved leaps and bounds over the past decade. It has played a crucial role in improving the quality of lives for the population and helped boost the economy for many countries. Technology is expected to continue advancing quickly in the foreseeable future, and cities will need to navigate through the complexities and disruptions that will come along with technological advancement. As the world modernizes, the role of corporates becomes more critical in driving large-scale agenda, and expectations move well beyond the primary functions of companies. Defining the purpose of a corporation will be essential to giving it a license to operate and how it expects to be measured by multiple stakeholders. It includes the essential role that corporations can play in improving cities, especially in vital times of crisis and disruption, where expectations move beyond simply delivering a financial return. Corporations must work together with communities, employees, customers, suppliers, investors, and the heart of it, to always consider the environment when making decisions. But we should also consider the impact of COVID-19. COVID-19 is the biggest disruption we have faced globally since World War II. Quite apart from the impact it has had on lives and livelihoods, as well as communities around the world, we have seen the acceleration of the pace of innovation and of change. We can't just bounce back to a pre-COVID world. We have to move forward to a world where our capabilities and efforts will be used to catalyze solutions to big global challenges, be it climate change, food security, water conservation, amongst others. We have to move to a post-COVID-19 world that is more sustainable and where we use the massive advances in science and technology to improve the way cities work and people live. In this slide, I would like to talk about 4 trends for the future. The United Nations estimates that the world's population residing in the urban areas will grow from 4.2 billion in 2018 to 6.7 billion by 2050. Cities today already face unprecedented challenges and pressing concerns ranging from resource scarcity, climate change, aging infrastructure to security risks. From this slide, we show the 4 broad emerging trends of the future that will have a pervasive impact on cities. With increasing urbanization, we will see how these structural trends come to life. The first is digitization and sustainable living. These are cross-sectoral trends that cut across many sectors. In the context of digitization, horizontal opportunities in segments and companies that service multiple industries and corporate functions, as well as vertical opportunities in the development of technologies that serve specific end user markets, are becoming more and more pervasive. Cities can also benefit from the increasing use of data and technology for urban planning and productivity. Technology will enable more connectivity and livability in cities, and people will use technology as an enabler for social engagement, work, and accessibility to services, including essential services. In the context of sustainable living, eco-solutions from alternative protein to renewable energy sources to autonomous vehicles meet our basic needs and minimize depleting the world's natural resources. And the 2 other trends are future of consumption and longer lifespans. And these reflect shifts in consumption patterns and growing healthcare needs caused by and attributable to longevity. Put simply, we're living longer, but that means we have needs for quality of life as we do so. In the context of future of consumption, rising affluence in emerging markets and shifts in consumption patterns driven by global demographics will put stresses on global production, for example, of food and water resources. In the context of longer lifespan, global populations urbanizing and aging at unprecedented rates. Opportunities for solutions to address the silver age population, for example, healthcare, retirement policies, and financial planning, to prepare them for long and more meaningful life are required. The built environment providing for retirement living, planning for co-mingling between the elderly and the young becomes more relevant in the context of cities. But let's look at climate change. We've had the hottest decade on record. Sustainability is at the core of future trends that I've spoken about, and that's why it is at the core of all that we are doing at Temasek. On top of taking care of our cities and its people, we need to ensure that the planet that we are living in is able to sustain us as we ride through the 4 trends of the future. As you can see from this slide, we are currently living in the hottest decade on record. Despite a brief dip in carbon emissions due to the COVID-19 pandemic, most of the world is still heading for a temperature rise in excess of 3 degrees Celsius this century, which is beyond the 1.5 degrees Celsius Paris Agreement goal. Rising urbanization in big cities is leading to an increase in urban heat, where night temperatures can be as high as 9 degrees Celsius than in built-up areas compared to surrounding areas. In built-up areas compared to surrounding areas. Rising sea levels is one of the areas which will cause the most severe impact of climate change. Cities previously benefiting from maritime trade routes, from being situated in a coastal area, are now at risk of being impacted by rising sea levels caused by climate change. Singapore is also suffering from global warming. According to the meteorological services of Singapore, Singapore is heating up twice as fast as the rest of the world, at 0.25 degrees Celsius per decade. Compared to the 1950s, Singapore is already 2 degrees Celsius hotter today. This temperature increase is not sustainable, as it will lead to downstream impact on rising sea levels, shifts in biodiversity habitats, and heat waves. We've seen how the use of air conditioning contributes to this, and therefore we will need to adopt better designs for the built environment with the use of thermal comfort solutions and new building materials, for example. Having said that, there are opportunities on the horizon for all of us. We need to look into the following key areas that are opportunities for innovation in cities. They're linked to water, energy, food, waste, urban development, materials, and clean transportation, all linked to sustainability of our cities and communities. In the context of water, it is both a necessity and a key resource for the world to cope with urbanization. Cities need to address the issues of water resilience, scarcity, pollution, and toxicity through conservation, treatment, and management to ensure that its populations have consistent and reliable access to clean water supply in a cost-effective way. In the context of energy, cities need to work towards more sustainable forms of energy to power up the various industries within and help to cope with the rising temperatures. The per capita energy usage in cities is higher as compared to the suburban areas around. Renewables such as geothermal, solar, hydro, wind, hydrogen, and fusion need to play an even greater role in the decades ahead in powering our cities. To combat climate change and to help produce more sustainable food sources, we need to look across the entire agri-food chain to see how we can produce more nutritious, fresher, and environmentally friendly foods at an affordable price to feed the growing community. The growth in demand for protein to feed the world's growing populations can't be sustained using existing sources. We require more protein to develop more protein. Hence, the emergence of alternative proteins. The environmental impact of, for example, an alternative protein burger is vastly lower. 87% less water use, 96% less land use, 89% fewer GHG emissions, and 92% less dead zone creating nutrient pollution. Waste is also an issue in cities. As a city's population increases, consumption increases, and more waste is generated. This places pressure on waste management infrastructure for cities and governments. A robust waste management strategy can play a critical role in helping cities increase its livability and to decarbonize. In terms of urban development materials, these are linked to the built environment and overall urban development of cities. As urbanization drives the demand for more infrastructure, the use of cement in the built environment is also set to rise. Cement is a source of 8% of the world's carbon emissions and the third largest global emitter of carbon. Steel is also a crucial material for the built environment and engineering sector. But industry is also amongst the biggest producers of carbon, responsible for 4 to 5% of the world's emissions today. However, there are emerging solutions that can contribute to the decarbonization of these hard-to-abate sectors. There is an urgent need to revolutionize these sectors, especially when materials can be such an essential part in the building of cities in the future. Clean transportation is the last part. Population growth and continued urbanization of cities will lead to an equally increasing demand for urban transportation. Demand for urban passenger transport is expected to grow by 60 to 70% by 2050. An important aspect of decarbonizing a city will require looking at expediting the shift to sustainable transportation means, such as the introduction of autonomous vehicles and to encourage ride sharing for a population to travel between various points. The move to electric vehicles is also critical as an interim measure, as it does help to reduce pollution, and this could also contribute to better healthcare outcomes arising from a negation of pollution levels. We must also look to accelerate technological innovations that can help cities decarbonize in the short term. It is challenging to decarbonize brownfield districts arising from fragmented ownership while ensuring business as usual. For example, cooling is essential, especially in hot, humid climates. But cooling consumes a lot of energy and contributes to global warming via the emissions of hydrofluorocarbons, their potent GHG. One solution that has gained traction is district cooling, but is typically incorporated into the design of a new development. There's a need to see how these sort of solutions can find a way into the existing environment in order to contribute to the carbon emissions commitments that we're prepared to make. Synergies and system-level resilience can be harnessed by integrating various clean technology solutions together. Reduction in hardware costs and increased sophistication in artificial intelligence have enabled cities to be smarter and to drive more efficiency. And to promote a more sustainable future, a strong public-private sector partnership is required to ensure collective responsibility is fostered. But cities cannot do it alone. Policy frameworks need to be implemented to help cities in their low carbon transition. Only 22% of global carbon emissions are subject to some form of carbon pricing currently. Carbon pricing can be potentially an effective tool for reducing carbon emissions in a fair and equitable way to raise finances for carbon-intensive climate adaptation projects. Policies can be geared to mobilize private finance towards sustainable investments and away from pollutive industries to ensure that the next stage of the city's growth do not lock them into carbon-intensive pathways. Cities can also work with local and global financial institutions to develop climate finance solutions to help achieve these goals. Cities, corporates, and communities need to cooperate and work with each other and share best practices on solutions to build resilience, cope with disruptions, and push the boundaries of the current city landscape to innovate for a better tomorrow. The impact of COVID-19 has put strains on government support and government finances. Providers of long-term capital, such as Temasek, can do well to invest our capital in game-changing innovations and solutions. There is a role of private capital in funding decarbonization solutions and to help to contribute to the reduction of the carbon abatement cost curve, especially to the hard-to-abate sectors such as power, the built environment, and transportation, all of which are relevant in the context of sustainable cities. When cities are sustainable and resilient in the face of complex challenges, capital deployed smartly and commercially will help to advance technology and solutions that are viable, encourage more agile regulations and policies, and make way for innovative business models, people, and products. Cities can in turn coordinate the policy settings, working with investors and businesses to accelerate solutions by promoting innovation and encouraging testbeds to help the transition to a low carbon future. It is also important to be inclusive when doing urban planning to harmonize cities and the community living in them together in a sustainable manner. And not just in the context of the fact that we're dealing with longer lifespans and aging populations, but also respect to vulnerable communities in our midst. In return, corporates should be able to reap the benefits of a more dynamic and resilient economies that will, over the long term, mitigate the risks of climate change and help define and create new opportunities. Together, we can work towards a net zero emissions world by 2050 by investing today with tomorrow in mind for the next 30 years to come. Thank you.
Dilhan, for your keynote address. Mr. Dilhan, for your keynote address. Now I will invite other speakers to share. We are grateful we have with us here today United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Habitat, Madam Maimunah Mohammed Sharif. Madam Maimunah, please.
Thank you very much, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, many cities globally have committed to ambitious climate action targets aiming to achieve carbon neutrality earlier than 2050. There are some notable cases of cities aiming to become carbon neutral by 2030. Just to name a few examples, Johannesburg, where all new public and private buildings will operate at net zero carbon by 2030. Milan plans to reallocate 100 kilometers of street space to cycling and walking paths by the end of 2021. Tokyo, their zero emission strategy includes, amongst other measures, the progressive phase out of gas guzzling vehicles and transition to zero emission vehicles. However, to achieve the target of the Paris Agreement on climate exchange, we need to find innovative ways to get more cities onto the new urban agenda bandwagon. We must make it possible for cities in the developing world to balance growth with carbon neutral commitments. This can only happen if there is multilateral action at the global level and integrated cooperation within countries. In UN Habitat's recent Cities and Pandemic report, we have highlighted 4 key priorities to deliver sustainable, resilient, and just recovery. Number 1, rethinking the form and function of cities. To not only enhance their resilience and ensure climate-compatible growth through inclusive planning, we advocate for compact design accessible mobility, and mixed land use to make more livable urban environment. Number 2, addressing systemic poverty and inequality in cities by taking steps to address the underlying causes of exclusion, particularly in access to basic services and infrastructure, adequate housing, secure livelihoods. We must also help cities provide access to digital services and tools. Number 3, rebuilding a new normal for the urban economy to help smaller businesses, informal workers, and at-risk sectors to survive the crisis with an emphasis on building back better by promoting the transition to greener, more equitable urban economies. And number 4, clarifying urban legislation and governance agreements. Authorities need to work in a more integrated manner, strengthen multi-level governance with an emphasis on developing more flexible and innovative institutional and financial framework. The time is now to further raise the ambitions. Local climate action plans with concrete and verifiable targets anchored in more ambitious nationally determined contribution or NDCs are needed to ensure that we move from small-scale interventions to citywide action that can be replicated nationally and internationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Maimunah. Unfortunately, Dr. Bambang Susantono, Vice President for Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development of the Asian Development Bank, is not able to join us today. Instead, Mr. Manoj Sharma, Chief of the Urban Sector Group at the Asian Development Bank, will join on his behalf. Mr. Manoj, please.
Thank you. Greetings from the Asian Development Bank. I am Manoj Sharma, Chief of Urban Sector Group in ADB, and it's my pleasure to join this important event on behalf of Dr. Bambang Susantono, Vice President, Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development in ADB. So at the outset, I want to thank you all for organizing this great event despite the COVID-19 pandemic. We see how the challenge of inadequate urban and social infrastructure already existing before the pandemic is now having a more severe impact on the urban poor and the vulnerable groups. Another example of challenge is the digital divide. While the rich continue to enjoy surfing the online world in virtual settings, the low-income communities face the new challenge of digital poverty. Unequal access to digital connectivity is increasing among the poor and the vulnerable groups, leaving them, especially students, at a huge disadvantage. The pandemic should be the catalyst that compels us to reprioritize the themes, target groups, and geographical areas for urban development in our cities. Next slide, please. So indeed, COVID-19 is largely an urban crisis. So the impacts of the pandemic are most felt by the residents of cities. Our approach at ADB is to build the resilience of cities and communities to tackle the vulnerabilities and shocks, whether physical, social, environmental, or economic. ADB's Livable Cities Guidance Note on the Pandemic Response proposes a 5 E's approach to respond to these issues. The E's stand for economic competitiveness, environmental sustainability and resilience, equity and inclusiveness, enablers, and engagement. Quite similar to what we heard from ED Maimunah Sharif. We understand the 3 E's of economic competitiveness, environmental sustainability, and equity or social inclusiveness. The additional E or enablers reflect the policies, strategies, and systems of governance of cities. The 5th E or engagement is about collaboration and partnership with a broad range of stakeholders. Next slide, please. For us in ADB, Livable Cities is a cross-sector and cross-thematic platform to provide integrated solutions. And how do we provide integrated solutions? Firstly, ADB supports integrating investments on hard infrastructure with strengthening of institutions. And that's done through improving cities' policies, systems, and governance, not to forget the human resources and capacity development. Secondly, integration must happen through strong coordination mechanisms across various stakeholders, including the different layers of the governments, national, subnational, and city level. Thirdly, for us, integration also includes public-private people partnership, or 4Ps, as a foundation for participatory urban planning. The term integration is absolutely appropriate in capturing ADB's approach to livable cities. This is because we at ADB integrate our knowledge work with our financing to design effective and resilient urban investments for our developing member countries. Next slide, please, which is the last one. So we firmly believe that cities can turn this crisis into an opportunity. A city can and should aim to be more safe, healthy, inclusive, environmentally sustainable, and resilient as the recovery takes hold. Our goal is to make cities more livable in the region and to help all citizens, regardless of gender, age, economic status, or abilities, prosper and build their uniqueness. This uniqueness is the very essence of each city and each citizen. And this is what we call soul of a city. And this is what we aim to build on and preserve. We look forward to continuing our collaboration with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Manoj. We are also grateful to have Yoshiyuki Hanasawa-san, Executive Vice President, Chief Regional Officer of Mitsubishi Heavy Industries in the Asia Pacific and India. Hanasawa-san, please.
Thank you very much for giving me this great opportunity to be here. As a global industrial player, please let me explain how MHI contribute to smart city, focusing on energy infrastructure. The first slide shows MHI basic concept for smart city development. We have identified viewpoints and the necessary actions. First, continuous growth and employment opportunities are crucial for cities. To achieve this, cities will need to track data to set a target and monitor progress. Second, we believe that cities will improve people's quality of life as they ensure comfortable and convenient living spaces, as well as resilience against future threats. Smart infrastructure supported by a robust branding strategy will help raise the city's brand value and encourage inflow of the people, resulting in more enterprise and tax income for the city. Third, cities need to encourage investors to support for their sustainable development efforts. MHI is partnering the University of New South Wales in Australia to develop QUOM. It's a key index. Using QUOM, we evaluate, quantify, and visualize the social, economic, and environmental impact for city to establish high-quality energy infrastructure. Visualization is key to showing the value of sustainable investment opportunity to investors, thereby promoting proper development. The second slide, which shows MHI approach for smart infrastructure and its control system, which lays foundation for any smart city. Cities must urgently promote CO2 reduction or carbon neutral solution to help reach their climate goals, while cities will need reliable and robust energy supply for economic activities. To reduce power consumption, we suggest to first adopt a highly efficient energy supply system, such as combined heat and power in the form of heat pumps, district cooling, and also waste-to-energy systems. Renewable energy, such as solar and wind, will continue to gain traction, but subject to weather conditions, which result in unstable power supply. These can be addressed through innovative technologies that MHI is currently developing, such as battery storage and the carbon capture storage, as well as alternative and cleaner fuels like hydrogen, ammonia, biomass, and municipal waste. Hydrogen can enable greater use of renewable electricity and decarbonize every part of the global community. MHI is developing 100% hydrogen-firing gas turbines and will be successful in coming years, which will be stabilized the grid. more industrial park or industrial player having distributed energy system will also deploy renewable energy facilities. This could lead them to become prosumers. As such, energy production, supply, and usage system in smart city will become more complex. Digital solution, digital twin, AI, IoT will be required to better control new technology-based machinery and equipment and efficiently manage supply and demand. Thank you very much.
It is with great pleasure to welcome Mr. Cheng Wen-san, Mayor of Taoyuan City. Mayor Cheng is not able to join us live, but will share his pre-recorded video. Let's welcome Mayor Cheng, please.
大家好，我来自台湾，我是桃园市长郑文灿，很高兴有机会参与2021年世界城市高峰会。桃园是台湾的门户，也是台湾最大的工业聚落。桃园的工业产值每一年将近1000亿美金，是台湾第1名。桃园具有产业、区位、交通以及人口4大优势，同时因为有桃园国际机场以及台北港所带来的双港效应，我们有1800家物流业群聚在桃园，但物流业的增加也同时增加了车辆以及空污的负担，因此我们要思考物流产业带来的环境的挑战，如何能够让经济发展符合永续发展、低碳发展的目标。2016年，桃园市制定了发展低碳绿色城市自治条例，以及温室气体的管制执行方案。统计2017年到2019年，我们一共减碳了443万公吨。2019年，桃园市与伊可里签约，成为全球的生态物流社群主席城市。我们成立了生态物流专案办公室，规划了5个示范区，其中大溪商圈的示范区，我们有推动低碳宁静转运站以及交通宁静区，包括低碳运具，让物流货车在转运站内卸货，再用电动机车或电动车辆完成配送，减少了大货车的空气污染与噪音，一年可以减少3公吨的碳排放量。沙仑绿仓储示范区发展绿电以及储能系统，并建置智慧化水资源管理系统，预估一年生产的绿电高达900万度。中华邮政物流园区以及华雅科技园区，我们鼓励了绿电以及绿建筑，市府也携手企业车队，以低碳车队的方式宣示低污染货车的方向。我们预估可以削减 PM10 34.6公吨， PM2.5 30.6公吨， NOx 437公吨。桃园持续规划各种低碳目标，我们希望2050年迈向零碳的目标。桃园也积极推动绿色交通，摩托车是东南亚地区常见的交通工具，桃园则是电动机车最大的产地。我们的电动机车已经到达78000辆，市府补贴民众购买电动机车，广设充电站。而比较不环保的2行程机车，我们淘汰掉，只剩下35000辆。2020年，桃园 PM2.5 每立方公尺13.4微克，创下历史的新低，而且比国家标准的每立方公尺15微克还要低。可见的，我们绿色交通的政策是非常成功的。展望未来，绿色交通、低碳城市是我们共同的目标，期盼疫情早日落幕，永续发展，让我们的城市之间拥有 更多的共同语言。
Thank you, Mayor Cheng. We are also very honored to have Mr. Lim Eng Hwee, Chief Executive Officer of Urban Redevelopment Authority Singapore, here with us today. Mr. Lim, please.
Thank you, Deborah. Hello, everyone. Well, Dilhan has sketched out the increasing unprecedented complex challenges that many of our cities face. And COVID is just one of the many disruptions that we are facing or will face in the future. And with all these challenges comes an increasing need for city leaders and urban planners to better balance different needs and objectives and to find urban solutions and innovations to address these challenges. We heard many good advice from the various WCS speakers past 2 days. I'll share a few approaches that we are taking in dealing with some of these challenges from a practitioner perspective. In Singapore, we have been taking a long-term approach in urban planning, balancing socio-economic and environmental considerations. And this is to ensure that both the current and future needs of our people can be met while optimizing our limited land and sea space, and yet creating a sustainable and high-quality living environment. This involves developing broad strategies and also identifying land for various needs for the long term, which then translate into planning for the necessary infrastructure and resources to support these plans. And to better consider the challenges and opportunities in this increasingly complex world, we constantly review and adapt our long-term planning approach. We are starting our review of the long-term plan this year, which is done typically once every 10 years. And this time around, we're focusing on planning for optionality and resilience. And focusing on optionality can help us examine the possible futures that could arise in a systematic manner. It helps to prevent us from being too absorbed by the current short-term trends of crisis, but also to think about the important possible long-term trends that we should not lose sight of. And this will lead to a set of plans and strategies that can respond to different trends so that Singapore can be better prepared, not just for the next pandemic, but possible future trends and uncertainties. And a key part of this approach is also to identify important signposts to track and monitor the changing circumstances so that planners can be alerted on the need to reevaluate strategies and assess the best way forward. It enables us to be more agile and flexible, to be able to adapt to changing needs and seize any opportunities that may arise. As we monitor signposts, we also need to keep sight of the larger vision, something that the earlier speaker has also talked about. A shared vision that is based on a future that society as a whole wants to see. It is very important for us to gather views from people as we develop our plans. This is even more critical now in a disrupted world where all our aspirations, our lifestyles and business needs may be changing and could be changing very quickly. We regularly engage with communities, stakeholders, professionals, experts to gather feedback and co-develop ideas. This is to allow us to tap on the collective wisdom of the people and strengthen our social resilience. I've so far talked about what we are adapting our land use planning process to make us better prepared for all sorts of future uncertainties. But I think right now, one aspect on everyone's minds is how cities might respond to changes in the way we live, work and play post-COVID. We have seen new innovations and accelerated digital adoption in the past year as we adapt to overcome the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, whether it's remote working, contactless e-commerce, e-services, virtual social interactions like what we are doing now. This has underlined the importance of digital transformation that Dilhan talked about earlier, and also innovation in overcoming disruptions. And it will likely continue to be the case in the future. We should find ways to capitalize on this accelerated trend towards a digitally connected world. Secondly, high-density cities come with higher productivity, more innovation, shorter commutes, and better access to services. We need to consider how we can continue to harness the benefit of high-density cities while still ensuring a good quality living environment. One way we've been doing so in Singapore is to adopt a polycentric strategy whereby our important international gateway like port and airport and the industry around it, as well as other job nodes that are spread out throughout the island for better distribution of jobs to bring them closer to homes. And for our towns, we have been planning them with shops and amenities easily accessible for the residents. And this has been particularly useful during this period when many people are working from home. We are also considering how to bring in more mixed use and a larger residential population within the downtown CBD and to further spread out the peak hour commutes. This pandemic has also shown light on the importance of designing for health and well-being to encourage active lifestyle and to reduce health risk, both physical and mental. We are increasing greenery provision and planning for more parks and open spaces. Like Minister mentioned at the opening address, by 2030, we hope more than 9 in 10 homes in Singapore will have access to a park within a walking distance or a park connector. And creating opportunities for physical activities to influence healthy behaviors, whether it's building more bike lanes or installing fitness corner within housing estates, in parks, and even in the city area. We also use wind flow modeling and shade analysis to ensure that our towns are designed to maximize natural ventilation for better air quality and shade and lighting for thermal comfort and safer places. So what I've shared above are just some of the practical ways that we, and I think other cities are also exploring, can respond to and emerge stronger from the major disruptions that we are experiencing now, and also enable us to better adapt to possible future shocks as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lim. And last but not least, let us welcome another esteemed speaker, Mr. Manish Prakash, Managing Director of WW Government, Asia Pacific and Japan, Microsoft. Mr. Prakash, please.
Thank you, Deborah, and a warm welcome to all the audience here. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to be on this panel with distinguished speakers from all across all aspects of this topic, and to hear and listen to them. We have entered an era of unprecedented change. As we recover from the ongoing pandemic, some things will never change again. And in many ways, we also have an opportunity to reimagine the world and cities and living in general. So that presents a once-in-a-generation opportunity for us to shape and build a stronger, healthier, sustainable, and resilient world for our future generations. Rapid urbanization, demographic shifts, climate change, advancements in technology have all been drivers for disruption for an already complex topic such as smart cities. However, I'm going to focus on 4 key shifts that are being driven on account of digital disruption in the times to come. The first on the list is citizen-first principles will be the cornerstone of the vision of any smart city of the future. In everything from policy to strategy to master planning to design architecture and delivery of services. If you think of the recent experience, a 360-degree citizen centricity was core to disease tracing and tracking, and more important, to deliver services from vaccine to welfare payments to remote work and even voting in some situations. An example of this is the digital identity ecosystem, which is secure, scalable, resilient, and reliable, that can be used to streamline interaction between government, individuals, businesses in a way to boost compliance and deliver better government to citizen and government to business experiences. Second trend that we see is the rise of the data economy around the world. This rise that we see is creating a completely new economy that's powered by data and eventually intelligence and insight. The generation, distribution, consumption of data across the past few years have resulted in massive technological advancement in artificial intelligence and machine learning models. While advanced cities leverage this in the areas of connected, autonomous, hybrid vehicles, there's other cities in the emerging economies also deploy data-led models to deal with basic services such as safe environment, women empowerment, smart energy, smart utility, providing micro-health and financial services to the cities to come. The data economy, in addition, will also help foster innovation, create jobs, and build new industry paths to accelerate growth. And therefore, it becomes a critical part of the disruption that we see and a role that all of us can play. The third is the sustainability, high on the agenda on everything that we talk about. today. More than half of population today lives in urban areas, and that's forecasted to go to 70% in 2030. Cities consume 75% of natural resources, provide 50% of the global waste, and emit 80% of global greenhouse gases every day. With nations now committing to climate targets and UN sustainable goals on carbon emissions, government, institutions, and private sector are all invested in creating an ecosystem that drives efficiencies and reduces dirty energy footprint. And therefore, there are platforms disrupting, such as digital twins, that enables modeling and creating digital representations of connected environments in a city-like environment to generate quick efficiency to achieve these goals. So the time is now. And finally, as all of these interactions happen between highly intelligent platform that generates trillions and trillions of data, trillions and trillions of data bytes, trust comes into question. And trust, therefore, will become the currency of data exchange going forward. It becomes imperative that cities and its institutions will need to build deep trust with its citizens on data sharing that is grounded on fundamental right to privacy, transparency, and ethical data governance. In addition, cities need to protect critical data that's rising out of that cybersecurity attacks, and it will require a regulation, strategic investments, and technology that would help detect, prevent, and protect such hacks. Microsoft, for example, invests about $1 billion a year in security and scan almost 7 trillion signals every single day. We have a tremendous responsibility here in the way we can partner and build and design these solutions and cities and programs going forward. And it's an exciting time for us to be contributing to the fulfilling these aspirations of smart city and enable its long-term growth and prosperity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Prakash. With that, let's get to our moderated discussion. It is with great pleasure that I introduce our moderator for this session, Professor Simon Tay, Chairman of Singapore Institute of International Affairs. I will now leave the next segment in Professor Tay's capable hands. Professor Tay, please.
Thank you, Deborah. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I really want to thank the Center for Livable Cities for including me in the City Summit. And I also want to thank our keynote speaker and panelists for giving us such an insightful, broad introduction to this broad topic. I won't try to sum it up, but speaking from the different perspectives, from the corporate and investors, to the government and intergovernmental organizations, to the builders and planners of our city, and the governors and mayors, we really have had the different perspectives to look at the question of disruption and risks. Yes, of course, just as we're meeting virtually, the pandemic has been front and center, but much more forward-looking and broadly. Each of them has talked about sustainability and climate, as well as other mega trends, digitalization, which were starting to happen before, but in a way have been accelerated by the circumstances we face today. And in this, I've often heard the word risks coming out from the panel, but I've also heard the word opportunities. There is a need to innovate, find market solutions, collaborate with companies and with citizens. So I would say that's where we are, and how we hope to go forward is to look particularly at questions which have arisen from the audience. As many of you have registered for the City Summit and been our partners and participants before, we've taken the opportunity to ask all of you some questions and then pull out the questions which we felt were more tailor-made and suitable for each of our speakers. So please allow me to put these questions to them and then ask them one by one to come with about 3 or 4 minutes of response that will take us perhaps beyond the broad overview and key points that they have shared with us up to now. First, if I may turn to my old friend and our keynote speaker, Mr. Dilhan Pillay from Temasek. The question comes from Andy Kwan of Singapore. And the question is, what do you think are the critical new approaches that should be given more attention in light of today's disruptive new normal. If I could add to that, I hope that Dilhan might also touch on Temasek's own experience as an investor and perhaps the fund partnership that is started with Temasek and BlackRock. Dilhan, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. So I think that one thing we are going to see is a lot more connectivity in this world, because digitalization, access to technology is going to enhance that. It's going to have an impact for us in every facet of our lives, whether it's in the context of social interaction, working, engaging in our extracurricular activities, accessing government services, accessing financial services, the whole gamut of things. I would say two things we should bear in mind. First of all, change is a constant, and we have to live with some level of ambiguity. Now, governments generally don't like ambiguity. Private sector is more comfortable with it, but I think that is actually going to be a facet of this future world, especially as we think about moving towards a greener world, for a better world, for not just our generation, but for generations to come. So let me just touch on a few things which I think are quite critical. As much as it is for companies to think about financial returns, we have to make sure our capital is catalytic in nature. Okay, so if you're looking at financial returns, it can't just be the be-all and end-all. You have to figure out what else does it lead to. Is it able to catalyze human capital and look for the best of human potential? Can it actually allow for social resilience and social cohesion? And can it enhance the issue of natural capital between man and nature, and for that matter, humanity, and therefore a sustainable way of living? I think it's important for companies to think about this, because I think going into the future, society may not accept that companies are just there to earn profits for shareholders without having an additional role to play in the context of the well-being of the community. So in that, but then companies can't do it by themselves. In fact, the need to work with governments is even more and more relevant. And there are a number of areas to do this, right? From the perspective of sustainable financing, to make sure the policy frameworks allows for bankability of projects, allows for risks to be taken in conjunction with the opportunities out there. These are important considerations. There's a need for more collaboration and partnership between companies, because each company cannot do things by its own. It used to be the case that it's a winner-take-all approach that most companies might want to have. But in this context of a future world which is based on sustainability, winner-take-all doesn't make sense. And the need for collaboration and partnership, complementarity of skills, capabilities, capital is quite critical. So you mentioned, what is it that we're doing? So we decided some years ago that we would do more for sustainability. And now we've said, as part of our next decade, sustainability must be the core of what we're doing. That includes, by the way, having our own internal carbon pricing, which is now set at $42 US per ton of CO2. That goes into the cost of capital that we impute for every investment we own, every investment we're evaluating, and every investment that we make going into the future. But that's not enough. I think we have to put our capital to work to see how we can contribute towards the carbon abatement cost curve, to be willing to invest in nascent, emerging technologies, which, if successful, can be mainstream and help bring about the reduction in GHG emissions. We just have to do that. We and others, and by the way, I'm glad to note that other investors are thinking the same way we are and are doing that. Hence, BlackRock and Temasek's joint venture to invest in more earlier stage decarbonization solutions, to allow for these things to emerge and become part and parcel of the technology and the sustainable technology backbone that's needed for a sustainable world.
Well, thank you very much, Dilhan. I think that's a very comprehensive response to the question about the new approaches. In many ways, I think you've changed the word value. Rather than just seeing value as that profitable return, you're also harking back to the deeper ethos or value that companies and communities need to have. And I think the emphasis you've given to innovation and long-term thinking is something that really is new in the approach, or important to emphasize in this new approach and collaboration. If I could turn on to the next, our first panelist, Madam Maimunah from the United Nations UN Habitat. The question comes from Mr. Ramesh S. from the World Resources Institute of India. And this question is about cities. With limited powers, what are the steps cities can consider in climate change program implementation? And I remember that your remarks, you started off with a number of innovations and new initiatives that cities from Milan to Tokyo, etc., were taking up. Madam Maimunah, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Tay. Yeah, we are all finding creative ways to cut global emission drastically in the hope that of holding global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level, and thus avoid the most catastrophic impact. So let me try to answer this question, that to help coordinating the global community efforts, the UN Secretary General has launched the Race to Zero campaign. Partners must demonstrate credible strategies to halve emission by 2030 and achieve the net zero target by 2050. So to date, colleagues, this campaign has mobilized a coalition of 708 cities and 23 regions and 2,162 businesses and 127 of the biggest investors and 571 institutions of higher education. So we cannot do it alone, but we have to do it collectively and also collaborate with partners. So these non-state actors, together with 120 countries, have signed on to the initiative, collectively represent almost 25% of the global carbon dioxide emission and also cover 50% of the GDP. So I would like to encourage a number of cities have already announced such commitment, both in the global north and as well as the global south. And we need to harness the power of cities network and partnership to stimulate the climate action in cities. So at the moment, the emerging second version of the nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement fall far short of the emission reduction needed to stay within 1.5 degree temperature increase. And cities and urban areas must position themselves as pioneers. COVID-19 have shown it in combating climate change by ensuring that their needs for local climate actions are reflected in the NDCs and in the revision process. So this can also stimulate financial support for cities through intergovernmental transfers from the higher level government to local government, drive more sustainable, more socially just, and also more resilient local solution. So I would like to end with, we have to think together, we do together, and then we think, do, and then we partner in globally, locally, and nationally, and also we share our expertise and our things that we can replicate. And I also would like to share here, we need to know our local situation, think local, when we look at the solution globally, and then we apply locally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Maimunah. If I could add to that question, you emphasized climate, and I strongly agree with you. But in your earlier remarks, you also talked about social inclusion. Would you like to add anything about that aspect, especially housing? I mean, in the pandemic, many cities were unable to really safely and healthily house enough of these people who actually reside there.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yes, I think what if we would like to handle this pandemic and to handle this climate change, I think this is the most important thing, is that we need to work together. I think what is, I think all the other speakers also mentioned about the social, the importance of working with the community, leaving no one behind. The social inclusion is so important that we are planning, we are doing things with the people. And that's why even the Smart Cities program is also the people-centered Smart City program. So this is very important for us to look into the social, economics, and also psychological inclusion, because we are dealing with people, we are dealing with human, and I think this is very important, because cities is for the people, people is for the cities. Thank you.
Thank you again, Madam Maimunah. Now I next turn to our colleague from the Asian Development Bank, or ADB, Mr. Manoj Sharma, who's standing in for Dr. Bambang. The question to Dr. Manoj comes from Ms. Chitra Naya Rajendra from the University of Madras in India, and this is about climate change resilience. How can this be achieved in developing countries, especially where there is a lack of infrastructure, coupled with great limits on their finance resources? Manoj, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you. This is an excellent question. Coming from a developing country myself and having worked in the government in ADB, I can very well relate to it. In my opinion, inadequate infrastructure and limited financial resources, as mentioned in the question, are an opportunity rather than constraints in mainstreaming resilience in all aspects of urban governance. If I may say, investing upfront in the resilient infrastructure and systems makes much more economic sense even for developing countries, as it optimizes total life cycle costs of infrastructure assets. Let me emphasize that the cost of deferring action is quite high, even for the developing countries again, as it means paying additional costs for maintenance, repair, rehabilitation, or even replacement of infrastructure. We have to realize that building resilience involves not only physical infrastructure, but also the environment, communities, institutional capacity, or in short, the overall system. If I may add, to me, the how part of the question is quite critical. So how do we mainstream resilience in cities? The way to go about it would be to use smart solutions and appropriate technologies, about which we have heard a lot today. Just to give an example, cities could combine climate and disaster proofing of infrastructure with proper asset management systems. Another example is integrating blue and green infrastructure and nature-based solutions with gray infrastructure, or combining the structural and non-structural elements to manage the issues of drainage, flooding, or sanitation in cities. Nature-based solutions, such as restoring mangroves or water bodies in each city, are some of our best buffers against disasters and climate change, and they provide economic and cultural benefits to communities too. So in ADB, as we approach COP26, we are quite committed to meeting our ambitious target of $80 billion in climate finance by 2030. We are also preparing to align our operations with the goals of Paris Agreement on climate action. Having said that, I have to emphasize that system-wide resilience is important, but equally important is the focus on addressing poverty and reducing inequalities, which we have heard quite a lot today. So the pandemic has widened the urban divide and put inequalities in sharp relief. So we must continue our pro-poor and socially inclusive approach as the pandemic plays out here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma, especially the comments about the finance part and building. If I could, on that note, turn to our next panelist, Hanasawa-san from Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, of course, which is the builder of a lot of infrastructure in our cities. The question comes from Dr. Sukuramaran Nair, who is from India at the Center for Green Technology and Management, and it relates to climate change. In the middle of climate change disruptions, how can we develop a city-specific low-carbon strategy, prevention and recovery? And in asking this question, I recall that in his remarks, Hanasawa-san has mentioned how hydrogen, ammonia, and other low-carbon or no-carbon solutions might be needs to be pioneered. And I want to add that I'm proud to say that a Singaporean company, Keppel, is partnering with Hanasawa-san's Mitsubishi Heavy to explore hydrogen power concepts for Singapore data centers. Hanasawa-san, please.
Yes, responding to your question, Simon-san, thank you very much. So before that, I have the 5 key measures. When we start to draw blueprint to fit social requirement, firstly, I think we need the optimal energy mixture to balance economical efficiency and environmental conservation. This can be done using index such as MHI core index. The second one is more important, is to save energy using energy saving technology available today. An example is Singapore Marina Bay District, which is the world's largest underground district cooling system with around 40% cost saving. Number 3, to maximize renewable energy penetration backed by the energy storage battery system. And then next stage, we have to consider the carbon recycle using the CCS and the CCUS, as well as the carbon neutral fuel and such hydrogen and ammonia. We are now working with Keppel Data Center. How we will do this area and when? We have been working more than 1 year jointly studied. I think we will reach the development of the hydrogen firing gas turbine on time. But the point is, I think, whether it can be, the cost can be reduced at the satisfactory level, the cost of the production of the hydrogen, transportation, and the usage and the new plant. That is very important point. The second point is who will fund this money. So everybody's collaboration to make the renewable and such carbon neutral, usage jointly and support society. That is what I think now.
Thank you very much, Hanasawa-san. I turn to the last panelist, who is live at least, Eng Hwee, from URA. May I ask you the question from one of our participants, Mr. Muhammad Nur Arifin from Indonesia in the city of Trenggalek. What are the best strategies, be it quick wins or innovation, that cities should bring on for adaptation? I guess this is particularly because you emphasize a lot of the longer term planning and preparation, but I guess this question about quick wins in particular is something interesting to him and other participants.
Thanks, Simon. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Eng Hwee. Sorry.
Okay, sorry, I'm not sure whether my mic is on. Yeah, I'm not sure whether we can find shortcut solutions. A lot of the good solutions actually take time to develop. But anyway, we heard many good ideas and solutions shared at the various WCS session. I thought I would touch on two aspects to add to the list of ideas in the discussion. One will be on digitalization. Not quite sure whether this is a quick win, but second, even longer term, what can we do to responding to a call to take climate action? So on digitalization, I think we heard that with all these potential disruption, evolving needs, and increasing land constraints that many cities face, planning a city today in this very dynamic environment requires a very holistic understanding of the city as an ecosystem as a whole. And we need to leverage on the data on digitalization to consolidate up-to-date and real-time information to improve our understanding of not just the city system, but the different needs of the people, and also to better coordinate the infrastructure provision and development so that we don't leave a certain part of the city behind. And also allow us to develop models that enable testing of different scenarios for greater resilience going forward. So just to give a few examples on what we have been doing, we've been trying to digitalize our entire planning process for quite a few years now. We can now quickly identify areas that are very accessible via public transport. This allows us to target where to locate, for example, jobs or certain facilities that need to have great accessibility to the people that it serve. And we can also evaluate how easily accessible jobs and different amenities like parks or retail shops and schools are from a particular residential area, so that you know which area might be lacking in something or there's a gap for us to continuously improve that part of the city. And also we can now simulate the combined impacts of climate conditions and development over the next decade or two. What will be these combined impacts on thermal comfort levels? So that again, there's lead time for us to think about mitigating measures to address potential increase in temperature as a result of climate change. We can also leverage on data, not just to deal with the long-term problem. Even over the past year, in managing recovery from the pandemic, we have been able to tap into the system and data, for example, to provide up-to-date crowd-level information to minimize overcrowding and risk of community spread, whether it's at supermarket, post office, retail malls, and so forth. And again, it allows us to tap into the system and database to identify available land, building spaces that can be adapted quickly for crisis management and stockpiling of essential items, for example. And on the people side, we can also identify locations where vulnerable segments of the community are located so that services can be brought to them, especially during the time of crisis like last year. Earlier, I also shared some of the ways that cities can respond and adapt to disruptions. But beyond that, I think another important strategy to consider is the city's role in climate change, which was just mentioned in the past few sessions. Many cities and organizations are realizing the importance of taking action. Many are taking aggressive public commitments to reduce carbon footprint and as a key part of their ESG. And companies, as we heard from Dilhan and yesterday from various bankers, companies are also integrating sustainability into building and business operations and their investment. And government can support all this through sound urban planning principles, policies, innovative solutions, and technology. I just want to add that the opportunity lies in whenever we are building a new town, a new area, or when we are embarking on major redevelopment of an existing area. Urban planning intervention typically go beyond the direct measures that I just mentioned. It is critical to plan upfront by adopting a combination of both passive, active strategies to enable a more livable, sustainable, and healthier urban environment. Yesterday, someone mentioned Tengah New Town, which has integrated various solutions to make it sustainable. Another area I just mentioned here is the Jurong district, which will be a model district where new ideas in urban planning will be implemented, and aggressive sustainable policies, initiatives, and targets will be adopted to help us achieve long-term ambition to become a net zero carbon district. So some of these include things like super low energy certification as a mandatory requirement for any new buildings there to bring down the energy consumption by at least 60%, and requiring developers to carry out wind flow, shading, thermal comfort analysis when planning and designing the new buildings. Implementing district infrastructure, as just mentioned, district cooling, pneumatic waste, conveyance, to serve all buildings for cleaner, resource-efficient urban services, solar, and so on. So we should also think about, for many of the new areas we're doing, how can we equip these areas with the future technology trend, whether it's AV or EV, for example. So JLD, we have also decided to designate it as a built environment living lab, where emerging technologies and innovative urban solutions that promote sustainability could be trialed. We can learn by doing and then apply these lessons to other parts of Singapore and share with the other cities where it's relevant. Thank you.
I think it's a comprehensive answer, emphasizing both the use of data for quick action to respond to important pressure points, also the longer-term planning and the need to test, bed, and innovate. I'm very sorry, Mr. Manish, I almost forgot you, but there in fact is a question for you, in fact, quite a difficult one. In your comments, you talked about how one of the trends will be to grow the digital economy. And of course, many of us are optimistic about it. But the question that is coming from Mr. Manzen Tarawere is slightly more pessimistic and more concerned about the risk of unemployment emerging from the digital economy, of digitalization, as well as the cybersecurity unpreparedness among the public. Mr. Manish, would you like to respond to those?
Yes. And it's an interesting question. Thank you for the question. If you think about what's happening from an employment standpoint, what we see is not a pessimistic scenario, but what you see is a shift of skills. So the jobs that are now getting created require a very different set of experience and skills that would be required going forward. For example, 70% of the jobs that will get created in 2025, we don't even know what these jobs look like, because it'll be in the data economy, it'll be in the artificial intelligence and machine learning space. So it's a shift. So the jobs move from one part of the economy to the other part of the economy. The second thing that you notice on that is, with the increasing capital flows into the ecosystem of sustainability, technology innovation, new methods of delivering microservices for health, financial, and government services, the opportunity is there to create a startup ecosystem, which will then lead to more jobs and more different kinds of employment for the generations to come. So I'm personally very optimistic in the opportunity that this shift is creating, the shift and the disruption by the digital economy is creating in terms of both for our younger people and the people that are today employed in different industries. The second part of the question was more around cybersecurity, and it is a very relevant question. The cyber attacks have risen in the recent times. As we go more digital, the cyber attacks we become more vulnerable to the cyber attacks. But when I spoke about the digital backbone or the digital corridor that we need to create for cities and governments and communities, it has to be embedded the concept, the idea of protect, prevent, and respond has to be embedded as a core idea into these backbones, which means, governments will have to make those investments, cities will have to prepare skills and methods to respond to these cybersecurity events that may occur. But today, the technology and the platforms are now, well advanced and well ready to respond to these challenges of the future. And like I spoke about, we track about 7 trillion signals every day on these topics. So there's enough of a solution play in this area. Thank you. Back to you.
Now, I had earlier asked for a poll of the audience, and I hope you've taken part in it. These are the results. The question was, besides the COVID pandemic we're currently facing, what is the biggest disruption that cities are facing today? Climate change is polled at the highest level, right at the top, and many of the speakers have emphasized this or sustainability. Second, there was the social animosity, and of the positive side, a number of the speakers emphasized the need for equity, social inclusion in our cities. And the third was technological shifts. And of course, another pandemic cannot be ruled out. In fact, some people think it's likely to happen. So in our closing minutes, and we really have about 5 minutes before start, can I ask the speakers within 1 minute each to respond to this and what they think would be the biggest challenge? If I could, at the risk of running out of time, go the reverse order, starting with Mr. Manish and going backwards.
I think each of these areas also represent, I flip it around to see the opportunity that it represents. Whether it's climate change, whether it's a technology disruption or preparedness or another crisis, another pandemic. There is an opportunity to monetize. There's an opportunity to create a better environment and prosperity for cities and the people who live in there.
Thank you. Eng Hwee, please.
Yeah, just a quick summary of five points. First, I think the underlying principle for whether it's planning agency or city government is to plan for sustainability. I think that's the most important. And then to keep a long-term perspective despite a short-term crisis, plan for optionality and resilience, and then continuously learn from the experience, like how cities are responding to the current COVID pandemic, and be agile and flexible to be able to adapt to changing needs and seize opportunities. And lastly, to capitalize on digital transformation and innovation. Thank you.
Hanasawa-san?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think, carbon neutral objective is continue long run basis, 30 years, 40 years. That's why what we have to do is how to pass long run to younger generation, how to support them. The MHI opened the Yokohama Hard Tech Hub last year, where the venture companies will use our facilities and they can make what they think their ideas to actual product and the actual device and the equipment. So such continuous approach and the efforts will be needed in case we consider the actually long-term carbon neutral society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sharma, please, from ADB.
Thank you. So the poll results are very much in line with our belief in ADB. And we strongly believe in a green, low-carbon, resilient, and inclusive post-pandemic recovery. And our long-term strategy 2030 of ADB envisions a prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia and the Pacific. This is what the demands are as shown in this poll also. We are a trusted partner of our member countries and we aspire to remain so. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharma. Madam Maimunah, would you like to comment?
Thank you very much. I think as the UN Secretary General has called 2021 a make or break year on the way to the COP26 in Glasgow to confront the global climate emergency, highlighting the COVID-19 recovery plan, offer the opportunity to build back greener and cleaner. And also I would like to reiterate the 4 focus. We have to rethink the form and the function of the cities. We have to address the systemic poverty and inequalities in cities. We have to rebuild a new normal for the urban economy, and we have to relook at the existing urban legislation and governance arrangement in order for us to be more inclusive, leaving no one behind, and to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Maimunah. The last few seconds goes to the first speaker, Mr. Dilhan Pillay. Dilhan, you mentioned sustainability as being the heart, the center of what you do at Temasek.
So I think, can I just move away from that in a way, Simon, if I may, because I think everyone's spoken about it. I think that we're going to go into a very different future for all of us, one that hopefully will be a much better, greener future, and one which will bring broader benefits to everyone. I think we have to make sure that whatever we do going forward in the next 30 years, the benefits will be more widely distributed within the cities, distributed within the country, and between countries. I think we need to do that to ensure that we have a very sustainable world going forward. Klaus Schwab, in his book, The Great Reset, talks about 5 resets: social, economic, geopolitical, technological, environmental. I think they all converge. As long as they converge in a way that creates a better world for everyone, and then it promotes social cohesion, resilience, I think that's what we should be aiming for overall. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dilhan. Leads me now to close the panel with many thanks to the panelists. I know I've had to rush you. There's been a lot of wisdom, but less time than I would like. I thank you all for signing on virtually. I hope it was enjoyable, and I appreciated the questions and the polling that allowed us to hear from you what's on your mind. With this, I turn it back to the organizers for many thanks.
I'd like to thank our esteemed speakers and moderator for their insightful sharing and discussion. We have now come to the end of this session, but a playback of this session will be available in the virtual platform Resource Gallery in a few hours. Do continue to join us at our next session, Enabling Resilient, Sustainable Cities of Tomorrow by Microsoft. Before you leave, please use the QR code or link to fill in our feedback form. Goodbye.